Hey everybody, today I want to talk about Logic Pro for iPad versus the Logic Pro iPad remote. This is a discussion I've been having inside my head now for almost a year. When it's not quite a year, but when Logic for iPad came out, I was always wondering, what's the deal with this? What are we looking for? What should we be expecting with this? And long story short, I'm sticking with Logic Pro Remote as my number one Logic related app on my iPad rather than switching over to Logic Pro for iPad. Let me explain some of the reasons why. And I have up right here the version history for Logic Pro for iPad. You can see that, of course, we got the mastering assistant and some other features, but we're really looking at hardly any updates to Logic Pro for iPad. One of the things that Apple has said constantly with the App Store is that it allows for updates to happen on a more regular basis. In fact, you want to do that, especially with subscription models. You want to do updates to help entice users to use the subscription model. Well, to be perfectly frank, Apple sucks at this. They're horrible at their own app's subscription models. They've given us relatively little in terms of updates under a subscription that we're paying for on a monthly basis. Why even make it a subscription model if that's how you're going to treat it? Where is the money going for this? Some big question marks. What I want to do real quick is also look at the Logic Pro Remote, the Logic Remote, and you'll see very few updates happening with this as well. So we're looking at kind of an old piece of software essentially at this point. We had an update with some stability improvements and bug fixes about 2 months ago. A year ago, similar thing. 2 years ago, we got the step sequencer tools. 3 years ago. So 2 years ago, we only had one update. In the past 3 years, we've had 3 updates. What is this? This is the only thing that makes me ever want to switch away from using Logic Pro as my main workstation, because they have never figured out how to actually do this in a way that continues to build on what they're learning. Apple collects data and builds amazing things. Great. So this week, one of the things we've really learned is that Vision Pro can run iPad apps. And I'm sure there's a number of people who are thinking, I wonder if it will run Logic Pro for iPad on it. And the answer is maybe. I don't know yet. Maybe there's something already on the internet that has shown that, but I haven't seen it yet with my own eyes. And people are not, they don't have the Vision Pro in their hands yet to explore this. But it'll be interesting to see. It's not going to be enough of a draw for me to buy the Vision Pro if it does run Logic for iPad, because Logic Pro for iPad is still limited and has a lot of issues. What I have open right now is the remote. Now, the remote is limited too in different ways, but there are some things about it that I think certainly make it my go-to tool when using Logic Pro on my computer. First of all, it does let me go portable to a degree inside the building, so to speak. So I can have Logic loaded up and running, and I can walk around and do automation control, transport control, instrument recording, MIDI recording. I can use the step sequencer. There's some big things we can't do. We can't edit audio or MIDI data for the most part. So it's not the main workplace. It's not the place where we can live on the iPad and do it in terms of like a proxy for being at the computer. But we can walk around with it and use the tablet as a way to, get away from the sitting position at the console and and maybe sit back on a couch or whatever and listen either with headphones or through the speakers and have that distance. So it does some of the right things for me still, even though it may not be a full replacement. Now I find I've got one of the smaller iPad Pros, M1 chip, and it's great. It's fine. The screen I wish was bigger. I wish I had the bigger one for Logic Pro for iPad, but for the remote, it's just right. Because instead of what Logic Pro is trying to do on the iPad, where they try to fit everything on the screen, with this, they are dedicating the screen to one thing kind of at a time. So I've got the mixer here, and we can go through our different mixer options, like volume, pan and volume, our sends, audio effects, I/O, MIDI effects. I can load effects here, and it's actually easier to load effects on the remote than it is in the full version. It's like they didn't really learn all of the lessons from the remote app and then transfer that thought process onto the Logic Pro app. So it's interesting that there's a disconnect. It's almost like the people making Logic Pro were starting over instead of one of those most important things in software development where we learn from what we've already had on here. So they've made the process of adding effects and things even more complicated in Logic Pro when they knew from the remote app that it didn't need to be quite so complicated. Let's just put like the arpeggiator, right? Doo-doo-doo. Now I can tap on it once. In the Logic Pro app, you have to actually go into the edit mode for that, but we're going to click on that. Now here's the next thing that I think is interesting. I don't particularly care for this format for the effects. It's okay. It's not great. In fact, we have some issues with this in terms of actually getting to all the data, but it's really no different, again, on the Logic Pro version for iPad as it is on the remote. They're both not great. They're both compromises, but they're totally different from each other, which again begs the question of why didn't you take what we already were familiar with and build on that instead of trying to reinvent a crappy system to replace it? It didn't go up. It didn't get better than this. I can show you a little bit better of what that looks like. So I'm just loading up a random project in Logic Pro. So go into the mixer. I think I have to go into the setup mode either way. See if I go there, it disappears the MIDI effects. So I have to go into a whole other mode. Go to arpeggiator. Let's go out of the mode. Scroll up. Then I can touch it and it goes into the one mode. But yeah, it's a different kind, but it's just as useless in some ways. Meaning, let's go to the grid mode. It's like I can do the patterns. Where are the patterns, right? It's like I can't even do the functionality there. So they've changed how it looks, so it's different. It's not more functional than we have with the remote. I mean, it looks different. There's no more functionality there. In this way, I actually have a better interface because the contrast, at least I can read all the words for the most part. On the other one, the contrast is worse. This is just one example. Another thing I thought was interesting is with Logic Pro here. Let's change the retro synth to a different instrument. Drum kit designer. Right? I'm just having to hit so many additional buttons all the time. This is the drum kit designer. Not like amazing. Let's close the mixer altogether. And there is no drum interface now. For the play surfaces, we actually have drum pads. Now, no matter what, we have to use the pads instead of what we have here in the remote. So I'm on the drum kit. I'm going to go up here and just say drum kit, and I've got this interface. Now, this interface on the remote is only so useful anyway. And maybe they thought, you know what, we don't need this fancy graphic thing. It's not really helpful. But in some ways it is. In some ways it's actually really useful to be able to have that and see it. But we can't customize it. It's like what I wish had happened was that they would take what was working but limited in the remote and then expand it and do a ton more with it. That's what we're missing. We're missing the evolution from one to the other. And so if that's the case, then I would probably stay with the one that I knew and was working with. Now, the give and take, right? You have to have the full version of Logic on OS, the Mac OS running on the same network as the iPad. So I can't just take the iPad away and use it on an airplane and stuff if I'm using just the remote. That's fine. There is a place for the Logic Pro for iPad that gives you that portability and the ability to work on it wherever. However, when I'm actually in my studio with a computer, then the remote version here gives me all the functionality that I want from a multi-touch interface combined with the desktop version. And the desktop version is still so much better than Logic Pro for iPad. And sure, it gets updated just as infrequently as the rest of the stuff. But it's mature in all of the right ways that the iPad version is not. And they don't seem to be in any rush to help add those features into the iPad version. They don't seem in any rush to polish what's there and make it better. They literally seem to just be like, we're going to go as slow as humanly possible on this. And that can mean a few things to me. One of the things that means to me is that they're getting ready to change the desktop version, but they right now believe that time is what's important. Meaning they release the iPad version, they introduce the subscription model, they let that simmer for a long time. So people stop thinking, oh, I forgot about that. They stop thinking how outrageous it was that it's subscription-based, and everyone just kind of grows used to it. More users are using, more users are doing. And then they, at some point, say, okay, we're going to gut some of Logic for the desktop's features, make it more like the iPad version, make it subscription model, and then they're still going to just update it just as slowly and build it just as slowly. It's not a huge priority, clearly. And so we go from there. So that's one of the options that we're looking at, is because you can't just take them at their words. Apple says they care about users and pro users, but where are the actions associated with it? Where are the updates and the value of the subscription model for the iPad version? And where are all of the benefits that they could be adding? They are invisible as of this moment. So that's part of it. The other thing is that they're just seeing what works, and if people will buy it, and maybe they're making plans to scrap some of the stuff that just is such a money suck on them, right? I can't imagine with a company that's just investing in Vision Pro and technology along those lines, that the old school way of doing music production is a priority to the company in even the slightest amount, right? I just can't imagine. This is not one of their main products at all. And so we are probably approaching a crossroads. We're going to see some more updates. I'm not suggesting that they're done with that, but there's nothing about this last year, ever since they did the spatial audio release for Logic, that suggests that this tool is anything but a small appendage in a bigger system. And sure, the spatial audio thing turns out is very important to the Vision Pro, creating that content and being a part of it, but they've only done it partially anyway. It's like they've left off so many important features. They've done just enough to make it so it looks like they're trying in some ways. Anyway, rant over. Between these two products, the remote, I think, would be amazing if they would continue to develop it. I've got no expectations based on their update schedule for the remote. But even in its current state, even as it currently stands, having an iPad next to a Logic Pro desktop version is one of the more useful additional things. It allows us to control things. It allows us to mix with multiple faders and fingers, gives us MPE MIDI input. It does so many great things that I think that alone, as it currently stands. And if you're looking at this and thinking, am I missing something? Are there other things there that are really amazing? Just the key command pages alone and being able to customize key commands into things that you're using the most often, that alone is one of the best features of this, that you can create a custom whole screen of key commands, much like you would with a Stream Deck. Okay, that's all we're going to talk about. I hope this was useful in talking about it. Hope that if you haven't given the remote app a chance, that you'll take a look at it. There is an iPhone version as well, so you have to have an iPad or an iPhone. But yeah, talk to you in the next video.